Friends, hello to all. Today I will tell you why the American Special Forces supplied the Viet Cong with ammunition. Not only for the Kalashnikov assault rifle but also for machine guns and mortar shells. However, the Viet Cong were not aware of the origin of this ammunition. Cases of its use often ended in the death of a fighter. Let's get started. Of course, the Americans were not going to supply serviceable weapons to those who would later use them against American soldiers. Specialists from the American Special Forces Observation Group created a secret project called eldest. In order to sow chaos among the Viet Cong to make them afraid of their own weapons. The plan was both simple and brilliant. Replace some of the ammunition in the Viet Cong boxes with explosive cartridges. The idea for this operation belongs to Colonel Singlab, a veteran of the Second World War. He was upset that the special forces operating behind enemy lines managed to find huge caches and camps with tons of ammunition, but they did not have the opportunity to completely destroy them. It was also not possible to take such a quantity of goods with them, so the colonel decided to apply the idea, which the British Army used in the 30s. As you may have guessed, it consisted of disassembling captured ammunition and replacing the gunpowder with explosives. The work had to be carried out with filigree precision because if any mistake was found, the operation would be doomed to failure. In the CIA laboratory on Okinawa, more than 11,000 cartridges for the Kalashnikov assault rifle and 556 cartridges for large-caliber machine guns were counterfeited. Initially, pentaerythritol tetranitrate was used, a fairly powerful explosive, which is a white powder. But the Americans were so worried about the forgery being exposed that they decided to use another explosive that strongly resembled gunpowder. Only an ammunition specialist could notice the substitution. I don't think I need to explain to you what would happen to a soldier who decided to fire a machine gun with such a cartridge. In addition to counterfeiting cartridges for small arms, the Americans counterfeited detonators for mortars. In total, they counterfeited 1,968 mines, but it was not enough to make ammunition. They had to be properly introduced into the Viet Cong supply network. Since the fall of 1965, American Special Forces had been collecting information not only on the territory of Vietnam, but also in Laos. The Green Berets attacked convoys, listened in on enemy communications, and looked for supply bases and warehouses. Whenever possible, they left counterfeit ammunition, usually one in a Kalashnikov magazine, an RPD drum, or in a sealed zinc container. The key aspect was to leave no more than one cartridge per magazine in order to reduce the chances of detection or analysis of the explosion. While it was easy to replace the cartridges, it was more difficult with mortar shells. You had to carry wooden boxes with you. The Americans landed behind enemy lines after a B-52 bombing and quickly replaced the ammunition so as not to arouse suspicion, but there were tragic incidents. On November 30, 1968, a helicopter with special forces was shot down by an anti-aircraft gun. 7 boxes of fake mortar shells were transported on board. As you can imagine, the explosion was epic. The remains of the special forces were found only 20 years later, but the project yielded results. American soldiers who, naturally, were not aware of what was happening, increasingly found bodies with unusual wounds. Either machine gun parts flew into the eye socket or the soldiers had their arms or fingers torn off. The soldiers attributed these incidents to the poor quality of weapons and ammunition, and the Viet Cong themselves shared the same opinion, whom the special forces tried in every way to convince of this. Fake documents were created, which an American officer would accidentally forget in a bar. Recruited agents convinced the Viet Cong that the whole problem was the poor quality of Chinese weapons. Finally, a manual was issued for American soldiers, which prohibited the selection of captured weapons, allegedly due to the poor quality of Chinese weapons, defective materials, and faulty ammunition. Despite such warnings, some soldiers still used captured machine guns, for which they paid with their lives. As for mortar shells, their introduction also turned out to be successful. Usually, it was possible to blow up several mortar men, and sometimes an entire battery. But gradually information about the substitution of ammunition began to leak to the press. The New York Times and the Times published articles on this topic. The Special Forces had to change the code name of the operation. The Americans gradually began to wind down the program, but before that they tried to leave as many surprises as possible for the Viet Cong. The Vietnamese also began to suspect something was wrong, which brought confusion into the ranks of the soldiers. You never know what kind of cartridge is in front of you, whether it will kill the enemy or you. This kind of Vietnamese roulette made people afraid of their own weapons, and it is difficult to assess the scale of the success or failure of the Eldest Son project, but according to veteran Major John Gibbs, whose article reveals the details of the operation, the project was a success. Friends, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to watch my playlist on the Vietnam War. It has a lot of interesting information.